Oh, so we just had a bit of fun trying out some various video editing software where they started out as websites and ended up being Electron apps running in Chrome.
Yeah, because you did a fair bit of research to two big podcasts that also have video, and they use two different pieces of software. One's called Descript and one's called
Riverside.
I found it a bit clunky.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of those apps aside, it's interesting how we've sort of come full circle with having client applications, so desktop applications,
Mhm.
from 25, 30 years ago.
Yep.
That's the predominant way of interacting with the computer, to do everything in a web application. And now back to, hey, that web app is sort of too complicated. We want to run it on the desktop and do weird desktop things. But we don't want to put the effort into building a desktop app. We just want to use Electron.
Yeah, it's part of that write once, run everywhere dream, right? Like if we're going to make a desktop app, we want it to work on Windows. We want it to work on the Mac. Maybe we want to have it work on some flavors of Linux. But like developing a Windows app, developing a Mac app, like you're starting from scratch. Like they're just two totally different things. There's apps like 1Password that are sharing a core. They've written their core in Rust, and then they write just the UI layer on top. I understand from a business point of view why places decide to use Electron, but
it leads to a pretty poor user experience, right? Because different operating systems have very different user interface models, and people expect different things, and they can't all be the same. You end up with a significant compromise that degrades the experience for everyone to some sort of fuzzy middle ground.
Well, it just uses use any of these Electron apps, and they use a lot of disk space. Like as things have gotten cheaper, just got some spam message. As things have gotten cheaper, so like disk space has gotten cheaper, RAM has gotten cheaper, and what do we software developers use? We just like gobble it up as quickly as we can. So like an Electron app can take like 500 gigabyte on disk, and like no one even cares. And so if you've got like 10 of these things, 20 of these things, 20 gig, you're just like, yeah, whatever. And then like in RAM, like an Electron app can use probably, I don't know, just pulling numbers out of thin air, but like 500 a gigabyte of RAM. And you're like, well, my computer's got 16 gigs, 32 gigs, whatever. And it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like that's just normal now.
There was a great meme this last fortnight where somebody compared the performance of a Windows 95 era machine to a modern day computer.
Yeah.
And it was faster back in Windows 95 to start apps up and do things.
Yeah, it's kind of sad to think but maybe like running one of those operating systems in an emulator on your computer is probably faster than a lot of desktop software today.
And it's not because of the hardware, it's because the software is just bloated. And the problem isn't just bloat. I think that's one problem. But the big issue I have is the user experience is now degraded. There was this wonderful thing back in the day. I remember Microsoft published the Windows UI guidelines. If you're building a UI application for Windows, this is how they look. This is how an OK dialog looks. The button goes on this side. It is this wide. It is this tall. Mac OS did similar things. So when you use applications, users were familiar with what was in the file menu, how to quit, how to open things, how to interact with the application. Things were consistent. Things made sense. They were very discoverable. These were very important, fundamental UI design concepts. We just threw them all out the door in favor of building it once with Electron, and you get a horrible experience for the user.
Well, I think it's just normal because you get used to what an Electron experience or web app experience is. So that's just normal to you. So if it's missing like what us who grew up on desktop operating systems, if it's missing some of those features, like people don't even realize they're gone, I don't think. Which is maybe a bit sad, but so you've got more of a Windows background, I've got more of a Mac background. I'm quite critical of how Apple have stewarded Mac OS as a platform the past decade. I think like simplifying, they I think there used to be a leader in UI, and Mac OS was like this pretty amazing thing like 25 years ago. And then obviously the iPhone came out in 2007 and all their attention went there. And they've just sort of, they used to be quite ambitious and adventurous with UI on Mac OS. Like you did saw the new version, you'd be like, wow, they're like really thinking about this stuff. Like where should stuff go? And like, I didn't like all of it. Like even the dock still to this day and certain parts ago, but like they were trying new ideas. And just in the past, like 10 years, they're just like, oh, it's good enough. Macs are selling, whatever. And then so it's created this like opportunity for these web apps because they're innovating. Like even if I don't always like what the stuff that comes out there, they're still pushing they're trying new things, they're experimenting. And so then that means that when you look at the AppKit framework, which is what I've used to develop apps, if you like look at the standard sort of vanilla app that comes out of that, it's kind of like feels boring and old fashioned, and it feels dated. And so that's their fault, I think, for being a bad steward of the platform.
Yeah, we can all do better. Yeah, interesting. And as a result, we've turned our web browser into the operating system. In fact, it sometimes is the operating system.
Yeah, if you think about what's in a web browser engine, like I'm quite familiar with macOS. You had the Quartz graphics library, so you had stuff that was inspired by the PDF model, and what people like Adobe were doing. They just sort of built that into the operating system, and they had like really good text rendering, and they had really good object-oriented frameworks. And then when you use like a web browser, they've sort of got their own version. They've got their own versions of those things. And so when you have an Electron app, they've sort of got all that there, like all the sort of frameworks that you like, the DLLs and frameworks and stuff that you'd have in an OS. If you peek inside Electron app, it's like sort of got its own copy of all that stuff. And there's nothing like technically wrong with it, but it seems kind of wasteful to basically
reinvent over and over.
Yeah, reinvent everything. Yeah,
WebGL. Like, it's just
it's cool technology. Yeah, I in one sense I'm glad it exists, and I don't. You need the freedom of the web. I think I have complicated feelings about all this, like because I think the App Store has been quite like the iPhone App Store it's got a lot of negativity. It's had a negative effect as well. So it's like all this stuff's complicated, but
why do you think the App Store has had a negative effect, in particular on UI design or other elements?
On innovation? I think it's had a negative impact on innovation because, so on the iPhone, Apple are wanting to keep off, and again, I'm biased. Not that familiar with what happens in the Play Store, but they've tried to keep out a lot of like malware and stuff like that. But they've also tried to, if there's like an app that's very similar to what's built into the OS, they'll be kind of picky and just a pest and sort of police those apps. And so I think what has happened is that people are scared to invest in writing new apps that are adventurous because they're not sure if they'll, and you can't submit a draft of an app idea. So you basically have to build this full, okay, I've got this idea for a Figma competitor or what, I don't know, I've got this idea for this app. I'm going to invest time in building it, and then I'm going to go to the App Store review police, and then they're going to tell me, it's like in Gladiator where the guy's like, doing this.
Yeah.
And so you're just like waiting there, and then they just end up doing this. And then you're like, well, I've just spent a year investing time and money and stuff in building this app, and then they've just killed it.
No, yeah.
They've said no, and I've got no alternatives. There's no other way to ship that software. And so I think Apple have shot themselves in the foot, and that's why the web is so attractive, because you don't have that policing.
I mean, there's some arguments, some debate that's been happening for a while around these app stores are just too closed, and we need to almost bring the regulators in and get them to force them to be opened.
You need to almost get the regulators in to do Apple and Google a favor. They're shooting themselves in the feet, I think. Like they're just the iPhone's been so successful, it hasn't needed. I'm not saying that the software on the platform is pretty amazing, but I think it could be like so much more vibrant if they didn't limit it. Like you look at, like one of the things that makes me a bit sad is that the iPad came out. Steve Jobs is like so excited about the multi-touch software and stuff you could do with it, and then it's sort of dead as a platform now. It's just that dream wasn't realized.
It's literally the bigger phone that people watch YouTube on. That's all they do.
Yeah, and so I mean, maybe that if he was still around and healthy and willing to put energy in, maybe it could have been something different. I don't know, but like I feel like it probably would have been. So,
yeah, it's interesting. We had this last week. Instead of going after app stores, regulators are trying to shut down M&As, right? So did you see the one about the Activision deal?
I follow a bit.
They tried to stop Microsoft buying Activision, and that didn't work. They just lost. So the regulators are going after M&As, and they're losing. They're not able to stop them.
Yeah, I haven't followed that in depth, but I get this sense there's this like trope about big tech, and then they've like looked at what they haven't been happy basically how much power is accrued. But then they're like trying to police in ways that doesn't really make any
it's very
sense.
odd. Yeah, I mean, if I agree that some of these big tech companies have too much power, that's fine.
Yeah.
But stopping M&As actually prevents the innovator, the startup team, the small business from having an exit opportunity, right? That they built something, they want to sell it at some point and get out and make some return. That's their whole model. That's the innovation model. Trying to stop that doesn't actually reduce the power of these big monopolies. What you should do is go look at their app store and go look at the actual monopoly businesses they have and say, maybe we should open that up or break that out or do something a bit different there to reduce their sort of market power there.
Yeah, I think that there's some of the stuff like this antitrust stuff. It's like not an expert in any of this stuff, but some of the aim of it is to stop anti-competitiveness. So okay, so if you want to do that, shouldn't you be trying to increase competition? Not competition doesn't increase if you go put a target on like Microsoft's back or one of these companies' backs, and then start firing bullets at them. Like that doesn't increase competition.
Well, and if you want to increase competition, just stop the big fish from destroying the little fish and doing illegal things. So the one that comes to mind often is the big fish will have some sort of vertical stack of solution, sort of enterprise solution, and the innovator will build some new thing like a new communication tool or something, and the big fish will just add it for free into their big stack. And that type of packaging is very anti-competitive. Stop that stuff or reduce it or apply the law.
And I think the other sort of angle I feel is like the user hostile stuff, like all this tracking and blah blah blah. And again, it just feels like they're just sort of their heart's in the right place, but then the implementation's just like some of the stuff in the EU, just like, is this making the user experience better? Like,
is this better or worse?
Oh, cookie banners. That's everyone loves those. Like,
I think the EU's done some things pretty good lately, though.
Right.
Good calls.
You not the battery stuff, the removable battery.
The removable battery stuff. I'm. You're not a fan of that?
No.
The one I was a fan of, I don't follow the battery one too closely. The one I am a fan of is, hey, USB-C, stop making another weird plug and forcing people to use your plug. Just let people use the same plug.
I think I think that's for that one. It's like I agree on USB everywhere. It's just the idea of like how you make that happen. I'm not sure if I agree with the implementation, like, because it's like what's the alternative to USB is probably Lightning, like that's the main one. And I don't know. I just is saying like from what I've heard, like USB-C is like literally sort of being put into the law, like thou shalt use USB-C. So is that going to bite us in 20 years? And we're like, USB sucks. Why are we still? What's this
Why are we still
USB-C?
using this thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how sometimes the best intentioned interventions can bite you, right? You got to be very careful. And this stuff is really hard. I agree. I don't know what the right answer is there, but there's certainly behavior from some companies that is purposefully anti-competitive.
Yeah.
And where it's very, very obvious, I think there are things we can do. But yeah, wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
We have about 25,000 other topics, but let's save those for the next one.
Yeah, sounds good.
And yeah, we'll do this again soon.